joined by Preston Marquez, otherwise known as Presz. How are you, man?
I'm good. I'm good. How's things going?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Is this your first podcast? Because I saw on MDRN's sort of Instagram page that you might have done another one.
Yeah, I mean, we had a podcast that we did as a part of the team. We
Mm.
spoke on a particular topic that MDRN that was talking on, but this would be the first one kind of centered around Prez and me as an artist myself. Yeah, so I'm excited.
Fair enough, man. You're excited? Fairs. Because I
Thank
remember like shooting the first one with Elliot, and this will obviously get back to, but I just remember feeling so fucking nervous. I didn't really know what to anticipate. But
It's
yeah.
weird. You have to try and because I mean, I felt exactly the same thing, and I just had to try and place it as a conversation, just a
Mm.
conversation with the people.
Exactly. And well, I mean, that's what I'm going to aim to do. Even though these are all fucking heavily scripted, I'm trying to make this sound as natural as possible. But first of all, how are you? You've just released Me Over You. What's the kind of feeling in sort of Camp MDRN?
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. I had obviously, like you say, released it. I think it was 2-3 days ago now. It went out, and we've had good feedback. Good feedback. I've had people telling me they like it, they enjoy it. They've been boosting it as we've had a little bit of that sun come out, a little glimpse of the summer. So
Of course, man.
glad to see that. Yeah, people have they're liking it. They've reacted well.
Yeah, and it feels like after I listened to it the day it came out, and it felt like a real kind of statement of intent for 2021 for you. And we're obviously going to get into the music a bit later, but from lyrics like "I kept pride and faith in the drop," can't see me facing a chop. Da, 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 da. I've got. It felt happy and bubbly, and I felt like it represented the spirit of 2021. But yeah, as I say, the music is something we're going to come on to. But first, I mean, I can't. With every podcast that I do, when I bring the people on, I want my audience to gain an understanding into who they are, where they've come from, and how they're in the sort of position that they're on today. Um, I'm curious to know, and we've spoken about this, obviously when we zoomed before the podcast, and I think it's really interesting. Like, so could you tell the people a little bit about like what your early life was like and where you came from? Because with a name like Preston Marquez, it's not exactly John Smith. It's not exactly stereotypically English. So what's your background? Because this is really interesting for me.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I'm half Mexican.
Mm.
Just to go with that. So yeah, half English on my mother's side and half Mexican on my father's side. So I was actually born in Mexico, and I lived there from obviously when I was born until the age of around about it was 5 or 6 years old. When we moved over here. But yeah, no, when we were living back there, I mean, the Mexican side of my family, we're circus family. So
Mm.
that's where I came from. We're performers. I've got aunties, uncles, cousins. They do a whole mix of whether it's from juggling to trapeze to tightrope walking or whatever it might be. So in my early years, that's what we were doing, and that's kind of what it was focused around until, like I say, me and my parents decided to move over to England and lived a bit more of a bit more of a different lifestyle. But yeah,
What I
prior
saw.
to then,
Yeah.
that's where it all came from. Like I say, I'm half Mexican and we're heavily circus performers as well.
Yeah. Speaking a little bit about that, like, what was that kind of early life within a circus in Mexico like? Can you remember anything? Like, are there any kind of memories that you have at that time?
Yeah, so there's a lot of, I mean, there's when I think back to that time, it's just flashes, it's flashes of memories, it's specific certain locations or events or situations that for whatever reason have stuck in my mind. Things like, I mean, for example, there's one thing I remember particularly when it was me, because I have two half brothers, two older half brothers on my
Mm.
dad's side. So they've got a separate mum to me,
Oh, right.
and I was obviously quite close with them, around them a lot of the time. I
Mm.
remember there's one time we were on, because being circus people, we set up in fields. That's where you when you move around and you take the
Mm.
circus, you set up there. And I just remember one location that had loads of the kind of the circle hay bales. I don't know exactly what you called them. I can't remember. Sorry, it's lost my mind.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
just remember,
I know what you're on about, but those sort of giant wheels of hay.
yeah, the big ones.
Right.
And I just remember it was one location I was sat there one time. It would have been after, like, towards the end of the day, kind of evening-ish time when we've done the shows. Because obviously when you're in a circus, you have a couple of shows a day normally. So you'll have an earlier show and a later show, depending on, you know, what circus you're with, who, you know, who you're with. Those times will vary. But I just remember this particular day, that was our kind of chilling time. The shows had been done.
Mm.
And I was there with my two older half brothers around these, like I say, in the field where we were based, maybe a bit further out from where we were all set up, just kind of just chilling, just relaxed. Like from what I do remember, these little snippets, these little things, it's a lot more. It might be, I might feel this because it's my roots. Obviously, it's my earlier years and where I come from. To me, I just remember it feeling a lot more authentic and a lot more kind of raw and laid back. There wasn't too much going on, you know. There
Mm.
was just me, my family, my obviously my parents, my brothers, just kind of living life in its most basic means, because that's how we lived when we were in the circus. You know, you don't have crazy things. You don't. I mean, yeah, you go to, depending on where you set up, you know, you go to the town sometimes, and I've got countless stories from my dad, especially when he was growing up in the circus,
Mm.
going to town and whatnot. But other than that, you know, you kind of just spend your time around the people you're with, your family, your close friends that you're working with. So the couple memories that I do have um, of back being in the circus before we moved over to England were these kind of, they're peaceful, you know, they're just kind of basic and raw, you know.
Mm. I suppose it would have also kind of, I get what you're saying, because it being in that environment would have put you in touch with a kind of very raw lifestyle, in terms of not like a lot of access to what I can presume is technology, and maybe like the outside world didn't kind of penetrate what was a sort of kind of innocence that you get only in childhood. But I suppose that would have been kind of amplified a bit being in the circus as well. And coming from, because obviously, you know, you're heavily involved in music now, you've got a sort of a media company that you're involved with as well. I was, you know, I'm curious to know, like, when you were growing up, like, was there kind of any sort, not pressure, but was there any sort of emphasis on, you know, your mother and father wanting you to do creative things? Because as we, you know, as we previously spoke about, you know, your mum and dad both come from performing backgrounds, and that's, you know, how they met as well. So like, yeah, I mean, was there any pressure to perform? And like, also as well, how did your mum and dad meet? Because this is really fucking interesting for me, because yeah, well, last time we spoke about it,
Mhm.
I just had my mind blown by this story.
Yeah, no, I mean, thanks for that, first of all. Yeah,
Mm.
before I go into the story, there was, you know, in terms of pressure and things like that, it wasn't really, because where, as you briefly touched on, which I'll go into, both of my parents come from performing backgrounds, and they
Mm.
come from kind of creative backgrounds, and that's the kind of people they are. After moving over to England and after coming here, I
Mm.
mean, a big reason as to why we moved over to England was for me. I've got a little brother now as well that was born here, that's growing up here, going to school, but obviously he wasn't born at the time. He's a
Mm.
few years younger than me, so I was the only kid, and we came to England to have me follow like an academic path. So
Right.
it was actually the opposite, you know, like we came
Oh yeah.
here, and because they'd lived a certain way and they'd followed that path and they'd followed their creativity and their passion, if you want to say, and you know, that side of things. But they'd you know, as being a parent, whether you're, you know, whatever situation it might be, you want better for your kids and you want
You
more.
always want what's best, for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. So my mom especially, it was more so my mom than my dad. She wanted me to be on like an academic route, and she wanted me to do well and have a well-paying job, and kind of go down that path that's a little bit more set out, a little bit more formulated.
Mm.
So through that whole thing, like I say, the big reason coming here to England was because of that. And through my earlier years, there was a bigger emphasis more so on education and more so on me pushing more down that route instead of maybe going through a whole kind of creative path and performing path. I mean, to be honest with you, thinking back on it, it was all there. Like we were heavily performers and we were heavily creatives, but I
Yeah.
never even looked at it that way in terms of
Yeah.
me finding myself as a creative.
Right.
So I mean, obviously I'll go into that a bit more later, but it was, yeah, no, if anything, it was the other way around, you know, there was a bit more pressure for me to be the academic,
Mm.
and I was, you know, I mean, like, especially from other people in my family, even kind of uncles, aunties, cousins, because we'd moved here,
Mm.
they looked at our family and me as more that side of things, that maybe going down that route for the
Yeah.
family instead. Um, so yeah, no, it was the other way around. I mean, obviously, I'll touch on as well. You asked how my parents met as well.
Mm.
So So as I mentioned, half my family, I'm half Mexican, half English. My dad's side is Mexican, my mom's side is English. My dad's side have been circus performers for a couple generations now. My dad in particular, he's done a whole number of things. He's done tightrope walking. Him and a few of my uncles have done trapeze. That was a big thing that they did. That was their main act. Him and I think it was three of my uncles
Yeah.
run trapeze, and they had this big show and this big act, and they were a little bit known for a while. That's what they were traveling for.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off because last time we spoke, I was kind of curious to know like what the kind of, because you spoke about your dad being heavily involved in the circus with your grandfather. That was one of my questions. Was like how kind of, I suppose, complex was the show, because you mentioned trapeze artists and stuff, and the gymnastics element, and then you also told me that you had like performed as a clown at one point in your childhood, which was a traumatic memory. So we won't revisit that for you. But was it like a full on like animals and everything type circus set out as well?
Yeah. So at the time, so we actually had because my family worked in different circuses.
Mm,
There's Zippo Circus. I forget the names exactly, but there's a few big circuses that we worked in. But more so around about the time when I was born, we had our own circus as well. So my last name is Marquez. We Circus Marquez, like that's what it was. And there were animals there. Our particular circus wasn't heavily on animals.
yeah.
Like they did work in other ones that were a bit more focused around that.
Right. Right.
But it was more so mixed. I mean, you had like dancers there, people that had kind of this creative acrobatic dance show. There was clowns. We had trapeze. We had tightrope walking. We had jugglers. I did that a little bit when I was very young, very young, just getting brought into the circus thing. Um, so it was more like there was less animals in our particular one that we did, but we had a whole variety of acts because a lot of it was our family. I've got a
Mm.
fairly big family on that side, and everyone had their own thing and did their own acts. But we also had on top of that a few kind of friends that we would that were there involved, and they were working and living amongst us as well. So yeah, it was a variety of performances actually.
That's so sick. And so, yeah, I mean, as well, you said to me like your mum and dad met through that as well, and that's quite rare because I mean, as we were speaking about before, it's rare to kind of have that kind of mix of someone from the UK and someone from Mexico, because typically, if you're thinking about where people could meet, like the natural crossover point is America and Mexico, right? But obviously,
Mhm.
for your mum and dad, it was a little bit different, wasn't it?
So yeah, no, 100%. So obviously my family were traveling a lot to just performing. They were live. That's the biggest thing about being in circuses. You travel and you try and get to the biggest places, the busiest places, the biggest cities, the biggest towns, obviously to get to as many people as possible. So my dad was going through when he was a few years younger, he was going through his earlier life, and he was, I think at the time, his main thing was the trapeze. It was around that time. And my mum,
Mm.
she's English. She's full English, well, Irish and English, actually, the English side of my family. And she's, ever since she was a little girl, I can't remember the exact age, but ever since she was young, she wanted to be a dancer.
Mm.
She was heavily into ballet dancing. That was one thing. But she just loved dancing in general. She's got a very kind of vibrant energy about her. And,
Yeah.
when she was younger, it was even more so. So she was following that passion, went to dance school when she was younger and whatnot. Obviously over here in England. And then she went through and tried to kind of pursue the whole ballet thing.
Mm.
As as people, I'm sure they realize ballet, ballerinas are very, there's a lot of checks they have to kind of hit to be like, okay, you can do big in this and you can go far and you can do this
Yeah.
to your life. It's a very physically demanding
So
role.
rigorous, man. It's so rigorous.
Exactly, like it's not just anyone that can go and do this. So she got to I think she was getting a bit more towards later teenage years,
Mm.
and it was kind of becoming apparent that she was going to start going down different routes in dance.
Mm.
Not necessarily being a ballerina and pursuing ballet. So she started traveling. She got an agent and she kind of started working with people and started just traveling the globe, because that was another thing she really wanted to do, was just see the world,
Yeah.
She wanted to go and experience cultures. And she was always a very loving and open person, and she was always accepting of other people. So that's a big thing for her.
Mm.
So yeah, she started traveling with a couple different dance groups. That was one thing, they'd go to different, whether it was clubs, whether it was events, whatever it might be. They had an agent. that got them gigs, that got them jobs, and they'd go and they do a routine for maybe a couple weeks. They do a few nights on a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, whatever it might be. So then that went on for a little while, and then my mother's group ended up going to the Philippines for they had a whole almost like a tour. Their agent had got them a few different things in the Philippines. And at that time, do you know what? I can't remember what years exactly these were, but at that time, my dad happened to be working with a group of his family, my uncles, my grandfather as well. They happened to be working in the Philippines as well in one of the circuses there. And this circus is where one of the places that my mum got a job. You know, her and her group, her dance group, they were there for a few. I think it was couple months, a few months maybe even. So they crossed paths. You know, my dad was there with his family and everything, and they were performing, and my mum was there with her dance group. And as you know, people might not know that, I don't know if they can imagine, but when you're in a circus, you know, you're working with people that are from different, even, you know, different parts of the globe, and you don't necessarily know. But when you're there and you're working together, it's all very tight knit. You know, after the shows, there'll be little kind of, they'll have people, you know, some people will have everyone else round to their trailer or whatever it might be, and they socialize. You know, these people you're with closely for a long period of time. So yeah,
goes with the territory, doesn't it? Because you were talking about earlier, like one of your earliest memories of being involved in the circus was sort of sitting out in the field. You know, you can picture the scene in your head with like the hay bales and stuff. And you know, the kind of picture I have in my head of circus performers and travelers is like it's a tight knit community because the job you're doing is very, you know, technically demanding, and it's a skill set that you wouldn't necessarily build up academically. You'd have to build it up through working with people who share the same sort of passions and hobbies. And so the kind of intimacy that would come with being a circus performer doesn't surprise me because you're just constantly in that environment around those people who share the same set of like ideas. It's not like a job where, you know, if you're in the set 9 to 5 and you're going into the office every day, you can sort of, and it's because it's not boring as well. Like you don't build up resentments towards people. You're kind of putting on a show, performing for people, and you're obviously going to learn to love it and grow to love it. So yeah, I can understand that that would foster the kind of an intimacy between people.
Yeah, it's a whole lifestyle. You know,
Exactly.
you know, they've all been doing this their whole life, and they relate. Like you say, this is what they're used to. This is what they know. It's a community, and that brings you even closer. Like, obviously, there'll be times when, because you're in very close vicinity with all these people, so there'll be times when maybe you wish you had a bit of peace and quiet.
Of course.
That comes with anything, but it's very much so you rely on each other. You know, if one person runs out of something or you need help with something, you go ask the person next door.
Yeah.
There's no animosity or there's no kind of contempt towards each other. So no, yeah, definitely. Like they just kind of had within that circus, within the whole thing, and they was just getting brought together more and more. I mean, you know, they're there for a long period of time, and they ended up obviously just clicked. You know, they clicked and they came into contact with each other, started getting to know each other even more, and that was
One
the
thing led to another, and then
that was the beginning of a long journey, you know, a long relationship, and that's where my particular Marquez family, that's where Presz, you know, was born.
fair enough, man. And so like tracking it as well. I mean, because in your songs you outline, you know, you were born in Mexico in 1998, came over to the UK in 2003. I'm sort of wondering as well, like, what were your kind of first memories of the UK? Like, what can you kind of remember from those early days?
So yeah, I mean, there's a couple things. One thing in particular will go from the very beginning. I remember coming over so we flew over from, I mean, I don't remember exactly where. It would have been Mexico City. Where we lived, there's actually an airport very, very close back in Mexico. So we would have flown from Mexico City over to whether it was Heathrow, Gatwick, I don't know, somewhere in London. The very, very first memory that I have of England was because when I was, you know, you got to remember, I was just a young boy from Mexico. I was still very, you know, I was below the age of 6, and I was still very innocent and naive, and I was getting told, especially from my mom, it was like not Mexico, England. It's almost like England was a promised land. Like it was like this mad thing. They had more of this, they had more technology, whatever it might be. So going into it, I was in that mindset, and I remember particularly when the plane was obviously on the flight, and we were starting to come to where, you know, the first bit of land was, where England, so it would have been somewhere along the west. And I remember at the time it was around about the sun was rising. and it was around about that time of day. And I was kind of in wonder. I obviously had the aisle seat. You got to get the aisle seat. So I was sat there looking out the window, and I remember looking at the sun shining down on the first bit of town and the kind of the first bit, you know, the houses and the first little bit of city that I saw.
Mm.
And with that sun and the brightness and the reflection, it looked like to me that everything was made of gold.
Yeah.
It looked like the streets were paved of gold, and it looked like the houses were made of gold. And like I say, me being this kind of young, naive kid, I was like, I just remember turning to my mom next to me and going, "Mom, is everything made of gold here? Like, is that how it is? Like, is that what you guys, is that how you guys live? Like, what? Like, it was crazy." And obviously she started laughing her head off, and that, so my dad started laughing as well, and they were loving it. They found it hilarious. And
Yeah.
that was like the first kind of memory of England, you know, as we were starting to fly over the land. And yeah, obviously thinking back on it, that's a big funny thing that we always like to remember.
I'm sure that kind of image of living in the UK was shattered over over
When I
the
finally, yeah, when we got off the plane and finally stepped down and that, yeah.
yeah, young Preston after seeing the gold and then getting off the plane was like, this place is a shithole, man. Like, this is not made of gold at all.
Yeah, what's going on? I should have stayed where I was, you know. But no,
um,
yeah.
Fair enough, man. And so, like, when you got to the UK as well, like, obviously, you're fairly young, 5 or 6. Your mind is sort of still in that mode of being moldable. Like, were there any challenges you faced? I mean, presumably maybe English wasn't your first language. Were you speaking Spanish first and then transferred over to English, or was it because your mum was obviously speaking English as well, being from the UK? Like, were you raised bilingual?
So yeah, no, the language thing in particular was a bit of an issue because I was coming over. When we were coming over, I mean, I actually, let me just to kind of clarify things. A big reason why we actually came over when we did, obviously the big thing was me for education, so I could grow here and have a different lifestyle.
Yeah.
But another big thing was that unfortunately my mum's dad, my mum's father, my granddad, at the time he was quite ill.
Right.
So the whole process of when we actually come over, it was a bit rushed. Kind of, my mum wanted to come back so she could be here. I mean, thankfully, he was healthy for another few years after that.
Yeah.
But at that time, it looked like we was unsure, you know, and that's why it was a bit of a quick thing. We wanted to get back. My mum wanted to be there for him whilst he was, you know, whilst she still could. So we never really got through the whole thing of getting me to kind of start speaking English and to teach me English, you know, fully. Obviously, I was still young. So it was rushed. I remember we came here I mean, we didn't have nowhere to stay. It was even to that extent we hadn't organized a place to live. So we stayed with my mum's sister, my auntie. We stayed with them for a while. They had a place. We were just living, literally me, my mum and my dad, we were just living with them for a few months. And the big thing was that I was still speaking parts of Spanish. Like I'd managed to learn, you know, my mum had started to kind of teach me, and even my dad was helping me now because my dad could speak English.
Yeah. He's a well-traveled guy, so of course he could.
Yeah, exactly. And he was kind of trying to push it on me a bit more as well, because I needed to, obviously the idea was that I was going to come in and go to school pretty much right away. And I can't learn if I don't understand what the teacher's telling me. So it was like a matter of just everything they said to me now was in English, and everything that they was telling me was in English, and they was trying to speak to me in English as much as possible so I could pick it up.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he literally, there's another one of the early memories that I have. I think it might have even been the first day when we came to my auntie's house and we got there. Obviously, I was like, I hadn't met her properly before.
Right.
I don't even know if I'd met her in person before that point.
She just sort of a voice over the phone to you at that point before that.
Yeah, like an online thing, on a phone thing. So at that point, I was talking to her a lot. I'd got there, it was all new to me. I was hyped up, I was excited. And so
Oh, that's all right.
And it was a matter of, I was still speaking, like I'll say a sentence to her. I remember I was talking about the airport, how we getting out the airport and the car park and going through to find our taxi. And half of the words I was saying was Spanish. And I didn't even think about it. Like it wasn't even in my head. Like obviously when my mom and dad tell me about that memory as well, they was hearing me and my auntie was there, like half the things I'm saying. She's like, what? Doesn't understand. But to me, I was just telling her a story. It wasn't even my head like this is English, this is Spanish. Like some of the things I was saying,
they were just sort of merging in your head. as well.
Yeah, like it was at that point, it was very much like I say, English was being pushed upon me, and Spanish was still there. Now, like obviously, because I was a young boy, I wasn't fully 100% fluent in Spanish yet. I knew what I knew. And I was kind of at that point merging them together. So that was quite funny because she was a bit baffled back then, trying to like, oh yeah, no, tell me again because you said that half in Spanish. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was a bit of that was the biggest thing I think coming over, and obviously a bit of a culture change as well.
Yeah. And talking of like culture shocks and adapting, so you touched on the fact that your parents' aim was for you to go straight into British schooling. Um, and like, what was that like? Was there kind of a buffer zone of like, okay, you really need, because you were talking about how like you really need to brush up on English so you could understand what the teacher was saying. Like, was there that buffer zone in time so you could learn the language a bit more in depth? And then what was your sort of first like memory of English schooling? Like, it must have been quite full on for you for, in terms of the kind of where you've come from to where you are now.
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. So I had because when we got here, and obviously we got to my auntie's house, there was around about a month, I think it was, until I was starting school. So obviously during that time, they was just heavily trying to get me to speak it more. By the time I did actually start school, I knew English enough to be able to interact with people. It wasn't, it wasn't terrible. It's not like I couldn't say anything.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And I remember coming in actually, well, I went to my primary school, and it's like you're the new. I mean, it happens a lot when you have new kids in primary school. It's like you're the new shiny thing. And on top of that, the fact that I was from Mexico and I was, I'd just come to England, it was like it was a bit of a, it was exciting because I remember being in coming into the school, and the teacher in the particular class that I got put into, the teacher's like, oh, hi everyone. I don't remember exactly what was said. Obviously, it was a
Yeah,
lot.
no, it's too far away, but
Yeah, but I remember the kind of what happened, and she was obviously introducing me to everyone. This is Preston. This is a new, he's going to be in our class. He's just joining the school. He's just come over, and someone, who wants to show him around. He wants to kind of let him know what's what and where everything is. And it was kind of almost like, yeah, yeah, no, like let me, I'll do it, and this, that, and the other. And it was scary. It was 100%. It was scary. Like I was anxious. I was nervous because I didn't have no friends here. Like I didn't know what English people were like other than my family.
mm,
I just had no roots. There was no foundation, and there's nothing for me to go off. So it was kind of that's what it was. And like I said, I remember walking in at that time, and it was a bit of a cool thing for me to be like, oh, there's actually people that want to get to know me and people that want to kind of show me around and start to be
yeah,
cool with me and whatnot. So it was a culture shock just to see how everything was and how everything was laid out. And it was massive because, like, I mean, in Mexico, I mean, obviously I went nursery there, and but even from what I do remember, they're not as the facilities and everything are not as developed. Uh,
right.
so the school in particular that I went to, the primary school, it was a big. There was a lot of grounds, there was a lot of buildings, there was a lot of students.
Mm,
So that was one thing with it. It was adapting to that. But I think I was quite lucky because I got brought into the group because it was, I remember one person that ended up kind of being my buddy for those first couple of days and showing me around, and then their friends, I got in and got cool with them, and I knew them guys for a long time. And so I think I was all right in the end because I almost got taken in.
yeah, for sure. I'm curious to kind of know, so your dad's a circus performer, traveled around all around the world. Like, what was his perspective on sort of the permanent move to the UK, and in particular for you, because he's been a traveler all over the world, and it must have just been his life and his bread and butter, and he would have gotten used to like calling someplace home for only a select amount of time. So did he kind of, I suppose, have much sympathy for you adapting to life in the UK, or was he kind of like, come on, Preston, like just get on with it?
Yeah, it was that. That's what it was. My dad
Really?
was like, yeah, I think for a little bit at first he wanted to be a bit protective, like obviously I'm his son and this, that, and the other.
Sure.
But he was more like just get on with it because just do it. At the end of that, it was you learn best when you have to learn on the job type thing, and when you
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
whilst you're doing it. And yeah, no, it was very much so like with the language, with everything, with getting to know friends, with getting to adapt to it. It was a bit more just kind of go and do it and
Tough
grow and,
love,
learn
for sure.
and yeah, just be.
For sure. It's weird to talk like kind of about people's lives so far because we are still so young, like just in our 20s. But kind
We're
of,
talking like we're 70-year-olds, like looking
yeah,
back.
exactly. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, I've been speaking to people who are like, just in their 20s and trying to have like these kind of conversations as if I'm Joe Rogan. But it's kind of interesting to sort of to look back and take stock of these things. Um, and so jumping forward a little bit to like the kind of midpoint of your life so far, right? So like, secondary school, and we're going to talk about secondary school and up until university as well. Um, I was kind of wondering, like, so as you kind of develop, like, what were your first sort of like memories of music as well? Like getting a bit more into the musical side of things, because we're gonna have to come full circle and talk about everything. But like specifically, what was your first sort of memory of music?
Like music was always a thing. Like obviously coming from a creative, a performing family, music goes heavily along with that. Now,
Mm,
when I was younger years, around about them times, it was a bit more obscure to me. I hadn't realized it. I hadn't really thought about it too much.
mm,
I mean, I always like to think, it wasn't even me that liked to think it. Even my mum used to tell me and things like that, like you've got a rhythm to you.
mm.
You've got a rhythm. I remember, I'm sure that was my mum that said that to me. I just remember being told that a couple of times. I can't remember by exactly who,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there's a rhythm that you get straight away or you don't. You have to learn it, and it's like, yeah, you've got that. But when it came to kind of going a bit deeper into music, like it was more so towards my secondary school years,
Mm,
kind of mid-secondary school and whatnot. That's a time when all of us, when you get to that point, you go through a lot. You're learning a lot, you're changing a lot, you're being exposed to a lot. That's that switch from primary to secondary school. There's a lot of exposure, and all of a sudden, you're being thrown in with a whole bunch of new kids and a whole bunch of new lifestyles and a whole bunch of new ideas and new things. And
mm.
where there was a lot changing, like music was one thing that always kind of stayed true at that time. Like I say, through kind of mid secondary school, even maybe slightly early secondary school, I was listening to music a lot. That's where it started from. Like I was an avid listener. I loved music because it was something that made me feel. It was something that made me kind of experience, and it was something that sent me through. It wasn't just normal, it wasn't like everyday life. It was almost like a dream.
Another world you could access when you listen to it.
Exactly. And through that time, like I say, I mean, I won't go into details, but there's things you go through and things you start to learn and things that start to change. And music even helps with all of that. It helps kind of to keep you, I think at the time it helped to keep me, I say it helped to keep me a bit grounded, but at the same time, it also helped for me to help, make me look at the stars and make me look at bigger things and start
Mm,
to dream a bit more, because especially as I started coming out of that primary school era and going more into secondary school, I always thought of myself as a dreamer. Like at the time, I never looked at it as like, yeah, Prez, you're a dreamer. But I always had that kind of mindset. Like I always just looked at things a bit deeper and a bit more expressive. And like there's something else to it. And that was music was like an outlet for that. I
yeah,
was
yeah.
other people that were they were doing this and they were using music to do this. And it was like, wow, like what they take from their life and what they experience and they turn it into this. And it was just that it was mad to me. And yeah, it was around about that time when like I said, I was heavily, at that point, there was no further thoughts on it. I was still growing, learning, finding myself, but it was more so that music, I was like a massive fan of it.
Yeah, for sure. And like from those kind of early days as well. I mean, it would have been difficult, obviously, for you at that age to say like, "Oh, I want to be a rapper" or whatever. Or maybe you did. I don't know. But who were you kind of listening to at that point? Like, what was kind of capturing your imagination as a sort of young teenager?
Yeah, like J. Cole in particular, I've always, even from earlier days, younger J. Cole, I had a big love for Drake. I mean, like Drake's been around for a minute. Like,
Mm,
even, people like Frank Ocean, but around them times, even kind of just before he was doing Channel Orange and things like that, that was a big thing that I really kind of liked and got into. Bruno Mars, I like that. It was quite a few singing, quite a singers was
yeah,
was
yeah.
for me. I even had around that time I started looking at I would like be in my bedroom and whatnot because I was less of a confident kid and I was less of an outgoing kid and outspoken kid. So
Yeah.
I would only be in like my bedroom and things like that I would do these things and I would start trying to sing along. So it was more so at that time like singing and them kind of focus tracks that I was into more, as well as these kind of big lyricists. It was the actual language that they used that I found such beauty in. It was the wordplay, it was the kind of the people that created emotion in you, you know, the people that made a thought, they made you think about things and they made you look at things a bit differently.
Right.
Yeah, them kind of artists. I mean, there was a whole, there was so many different ones, but those are kind of some of the big ones. Yeah.
Fair enough. And so you talk about like, we talked before about how, you weren't particularly outgoing in secondary school. And obviously now the change has been enormous. You're a rapper, you performed as well. I mean, because of 2020, we haven't had so many performances, obviously. But I kind of want to know what the kind of, I suppose, impetus on your part was to kind of almost change as well. I mean, you said university wasn't necessarily for you. And I kind of like want to kind of explore that theme a little bit more. So going from being in secondary school, like, and into those kind of years of adolescence, so like say 17 up until right about now, like what was the kind of shift like, and why did it happen? Like why wasn't sixth form or university necessarily for you, man?
It was mad. Like I would put it down to life. That's what it is. It's growing up and going from being a kid and being in earlier secondary school to start to actually be, you're being told now you're going to have responsibility soon and you're going to have to grow up soon and you're going to have to rise to it soon. I mean, looking at that kind of time, I was so earlier secondary school, like and mid-secondary school through them times, I was a bit more, which is also something that added to my love for music. Like I wasn't I mean, how do I put this? Look, I'll say it straight. Like I was an unpopular kid. I was, there was a lot of, I was the funny kid. I was the kid I was a bit overweight and I was kind of laughed at a bit and joked around a bit. I wasn't the one that you took serious, I was the
Right.
one that you kind of, yeah, you had a joke with and I was there and I was always around and I was a friendly one. But because obviously me being Mexican as well, that was heavily a part of my identity. And I was like the funny Mexican kind of thing.
Oh shit.
And that was like, obviously coming through with that, even then going on to like later years and later secondary, I was getting a bit older and I was like going through things in my head and mentally and starting to sit there and I wanted different, I wanted more. I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be the funny guy, the jokey guy. I didn't want to be the guy that's overlooked. And it was very internal, the change. It was very, very internal. Obviously, it was sparked from things that I was living through and experiencing.
Right.
And it was just this feeling, this need started to build up gradually as I got towards those later school years and going towards more that later teen years where I was like I was struggling with things, I was dealing with things. I won't even lie, that was a big part of it. And
Difficult time for anyone, man.
exactly, it's you go through things and you learn things at that time and you're not always accepted and you don't understand why.
Yeah.
You are who you are. That's who you are. You are yourself. You don't come here to be someone else and you don't understand these things. But obviously if people don't take you how you think you might be taken or how you would take other people, you're confused, you're lost. And that was a big thing for me during those, like you say, around 17 and whatnot, to move being a bit later, going towards sixth form years and then moving slightly onto secondary university.
Yeah.
Sorry. I
It's
was,
really,
yeah, sorry, go on.
no, I think it's really difficult because like if you kind of, I was in a similar position. I had that same perception of myself, in sixth form, that I was sort of an outsider, that I didn't really occupy the kind of, and in secondary school a little bit as well. Like I was sort of on the fringes of being popular, but I never quite was. I never quite, fitted into the kind of clique of popular people. So yeah, I mean that's partly why, I mean we're obviously gonna get onto the music and talk about it, but like it's partly why your music resonates with me so much in particular because it's kind of grounded in like a really sort of harsh way of looking at reality. Um, it's really interesting that you kind of mentioned that. Also, as well, like, I'm quite interested to know like what was your sort of experience of UK university? Because for me, I found university by comparison to like being secondary school and sixth form quite liberating because I could hang around whoever I wanted to hang around with. Like I was doing a subject I was actually interested in for once. But I understand, like from speaking to so many people about like what they want to do in life, like whether they just want to go do an apprenticeship, be into a conventional job and have things paid for, in terms of their education. Or other people just don't like university, don't really kind of fit the mold for it. Like, what was your sort of experience of it?
Yeah, no, it was a bit of a mad one. It was a change, definitely. That
Mm,
liberation was there. Like obviously, I say coming out of that situation of not necessarily being 100% happy with my lifestyle and everything where I was in the years just before that. I was ready for change and I was ready for growth. Like even just prior to that, towards the late second, sixth form years, kind of finishing off that, I'd already started trying to change myself. Then I'd come around to the decision that I wanted more and I was going to be more and I am more. And from then I'd started trying to look at things a bit differently, trying to be
mm,
a bit more. I was searching for freedom. I was searching for liberation and I was searching to find myself exactly who I was and who I could be and who I wanted to be. So coming into that time of university, that's what it was. It was an opportunity, like I'm sure it is for a lot of people, to break out of what people might have put on you before.
mm.
The idea and the feeling that people might have forced on you
Yeah,
before.
that
And
kind of way that you were
you know,
labeled in school. That was,
labels, exactly.
yeah.
Labels is the right word, and kind of being in a new place around new a new community, new people where you could be what you wanted to be and be who you wanted to be. So the earlier university years were that's what it very much was. I mean, like I did one my first year in uni, I did 1 year out in Bath, and that was the first place that I went to, and a lot of that's what it was. I was carrying on with my kind of exploration of who I was and music
Mm.
deep, because by then I'd gotten quite deep into music and I'd kind of realized like, this is my love, like this is
Was that
what
what you gone to do at uni, or were you doing something else?
No, so I was actually studying business. Business and management was the name of the course on that first uni. I had a psychology. I was doing like a minoring in psychology as well. But I was quite into business, even coming in through sixth form, later secondary school years. It was something that clicked with me. I found it more cool. I understood it more. I had
Yeah.
more ideas. I kind of connected with it more. So obviously being through that whole period where all they tell you through those later years is go to uni. You won't have a good job unless you go to uni. And so looking at it, I was like, okay, now what can I do? What am I going to be good at? What am I going to enjoy? And I actually, before went into business, I was looking at journalism in unis.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, I was looking at for a few months. Obviously, you go to your open days and whatnot. You go to check unis.
Right.
So I went to a few. I mean, I went to like Kent. I went to Westminster. I went to a few of the open days for the journalism courses because I wanted to think. Even at that time, I was lost. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I had this deeper feeling inside of me and this deeper passion, and I knew I wanted to be more, but I didn't
Mm.
know exactly how. Even though I knew music was a big love, I still wasn't. It was like it was in front of my face, and I was still not acknowledging it.
It hadn't fully slapped you in the face yet, though. It's just
That
that.
Yeah, that's what it needed to do. So that's where I was like, okay, I want to travel like my parents, because I always looked up to my parents and the way that they lived their life. They might
Mm.
have wanted me to be different. They might have wanted me to be a bit more 9 to 5, but that was never going to be me. Like I just looked up to them, and for a period, in a lot of ways, I wanted to be like them. And that was
Mm.
one big thing. Like even my older half brothers, they travel a lot, they still perform and they do their thing, and that was one thing I wanted to do. I wanted to experience different cultures, and that's what I was looking at. And I was like, and I coupled that with, by this point through sixth form and then going into uni, I started to develop like quite an ability with language, like words. And even before that, I always had like a higher reading age. I used to read a lot when I was younger,
Mm.
and I just language in itself, it was just like, it was a thing for me. I don't know. It's just me. It's just
Yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah. It was just a tool that you could use more than, I suppose. Not, I don't want to say an average kid because that sounds disrespectful to people, but I know exactly what you mean. It was
It
more
clicked
something.
more. It clicked more. It incited more things in me, and
Yeah, it was more instinctual for you, man.
Instinctual, exactly. And it was one of those things. So that's where I obviously looked at journalism and whatnot. I was like, I can write well, and I enjoy writing stories. I enjoy speaking about things, whether that's on paper, whether it's that's whatever that might be. So that's why I looked at that. And then kind of just after going to a couple of them, I was like, Prez, like, is this really what you want to do? Is really, is this you? Is this gonna be it? If you're gonna do this, is this gonna be what you do? And came to the decision like, no, it's not really. Realistically, I like aspects about it, aspects about the directions that I could go, but it's not me. So that's where I sat down like, do you know what, business is a, like I say, I always done well at it, and I was always kind of a bit more inclined to it. I was coming around more to the mind that I wanted to do my own thing and be my own person. I was like, I can do that with business. So that's where I went and studied business and management at that first uni, which I eventually ended up dropping out of that first place, actually.
Right. And so what was for you, like, what was the reason why you dropped out? I mean, obviously you've spoken about it weren't necessarily for you, but like, what was it that kind of made you think like, no, I can't do this anymore?
I think a big thing was depression. I was very, like I say, coming from that period, like that was such a mixed, mad time of my life, coming from that sixth form time to uni, and I was so lost, and I was finding myself, and
Yeah.
I was going through things that I wasn't ready to go through, and I
Yeah.
was still young, naive, and innocent, and I hadn't learned enough to be able to protect myself during that time. So where I was exposed to things, they were hurting me more than they might hurt other people, and I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
straight up like I was in a depression. And during that time, being in Bath in that first uni, I was so far away from home because obviously where I live in South London, there was nothing else to kind of support me there, and I was being a bit more like I wasn't living in a good way. I was in a bad place. And people will tell you that know me very, very closely. But I even lost contact with some people back then, and it wasn't like for the first half of it, the first few months, I was just kind of going along with it, doing what I do, kind of doing the same old, and then it wasn't towards the second half of that year, like I say, after that first period where I was like, yeah, like this is not. I hadn't come to the conclusion yet that like uni period is not me. Yeah. I just thought it was that place. I thought like it allowed me to sit in my depression even more.
Yeah.
Like Bath is such a beautiful place, but it's quite rural, and there's
It's
a
quite
lot of
cut off. It's quite a cut off place for even for a city. I mean, I've been there myself, but you know, you go outside of the borders and you are just smack bang in the middle of the countryside, like in any
100%.
direction.
There's not much else. There's not like loads going on to kind of pull you out of your daily whatever you're doing, to like, oh, now this is going on or that's going on. So it was very much that I got lost inside my mind, and I got lost inside myself. And I had good friends in Bath, and I still keep in touch with some of them, and I got a lot of love for the people that I was around and that I lived with.
Mm.
But it didn't have nothing to do with them. It was just that the way that I saw myself, the way that I was going there, that's not what I wanted to do, and I wasn't happy with myself, and that's not what I wanted to be. And like I say, towards the end of that year, that's when I sat there and I was like, look, right, what am I gonna do? Am I gonna sit here? And I was even falling behind with like my uni, with my
Oh,
work,
like academic stuff.
academic stuff, but not because of the quality of it was not a problem for me. Like the how hard it was not a problem. I was good at what I was doing, but I just wasn't paying attention. I wasn't attending every lecture, and I wasn't putting enough time to it because my mind was elsewhere.
Yeah,
And
of course. And that's
it
the interesting thing about being at university in particular. And like that sort of period of your life from I suppose like 16, like 16, 18 to 21, like the 3 years you're supposed to be there. Like because you are just kind of taken away from your parents, you are just sort of plonked in this completely, whether it be new city or new campus or whatever it is, but you've just got to start doing your own thing. And that's the thing as well, because like, you go through school and you're educated and you taught these subjects which are going to be relevant for job opportunities later on down the road in life. But there is no formula, and there is really, like, in terms of the infrastructure of school, I don't think there's much help in terms of helping kids adjust to the concept of like they're not going to be around everyone they're normally around at university. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because obviously if you're sitting there through depression as well, like who would you normally turn to? Like your parents or like your brothers or whatever, but they're not there. And so I can understand how like that feeling would have just gradually gotten worse and worse and worse, because if you've got no kind of natural support network around you of people that you need, then it would have made it. To be honest, if anyone was in your position, it would have made them feel terrible as well. So I don't consider it. Not that you've said this, but I don't consider it anything to like be ashamed of or whatever. It just is what it is. So
No,
yeah,
it was a big thing. Like just to, on that same thing, like it wasn't like anyone that gets in that position is hard because you feel alone and you want to feel more different and you are a bit more cut off, but there needs to be more support, to people in that position, because that would have made a whole world of difference. Just a bit more support, a bit more of a voice to comfort or to be there, not necessarily just to comfort, but just to help inform and just to help be a part of that time and a part of the narrative, instead of kind of, as uni students, is very easy to be left alone a bit more like that, and to be, because obviously you're going through that time, you're meant to be becoming an adult, you're meant to go out and push yourself and
find yourself as well. Yeah, for sure.
that's all well and good, and 100%, there's people that do that and do great, and I did start to find myself a lot more during that time. Like, I'm grateful for that year, even though I'll happily say that's one of the worst years of my life. I'm grateful in terms of the way I was. I'm grateful that it happened because it put me on a different path. But nah, yeah, like it needs to be a lot more. I think that's another thing we need to be quite aware of is how that can affect students going into that situation.
For sure. And so like, coming more into the present day now as well. So you obviously, like, you then went and dropped out of university and was just like, no, this ain't for me. And then you ended up working, was it in a pub in Chislehurst? And that's how you come to meet Elliot. And from my perspective, from like the outside looking in, I mean, we've obviously talked about you're a very creative guy, or from that, at that point, you came from an incredibly creative background, and you were academically gifted, and so on and so on. But for me, and from talking to you before, it didn't seem like you saw much in yourself in terms of like what you wanted to do, who you were going to be, where you were going. And I don't, not to put words in your mouth or nothing, but it seemed like Elliot helped you with finding the path, during that time. Is that something that kind of rings true to you, or like what's your kind of perception of that time that just after you come out of university?
Yeah, so I mean, just after that first year in Bath, just to clarify, so I went to another uni.
Oh, right, okay, cool.
After then, so I like I said, I wasn't at that point of the full decision like uni's not for me.
Right.
This place is not for me. So I ended up going to do a year in Hertfordshire.
Okay.
So that's why I had to do another first year. I couldn't carry on. It was a slightly different course, and it was there where I started feeling the same ways that I was feeling in the previous year.
So
where
it compounded the feelings you felt from the first.
it helped me to realize, look, like not enough has changed. Yeah, that it's obviously this uni structure, the lifestyle that's just not for me in terms of it's not the right, not the good thing for me, not the right thing for me. I could have carried on in either of those places and done the whole 3 years, and yeah, I would have got my degree and gone a certain way, but it wasn't the right thing for me. I wasn't happy. Exactly. So it was towards the end of that year that I then did in Hertfordshire where I sat there and I was like, okay, now do you know what? Like uni's just not for me. Like I need to go out and do and just experience and actually go through the real world if you want.
Sure.
And it was there. I mean, coming out of that and obviously deciding there that I didn't want to do uni anymore. It was like, because even during that first year in Bath, music had started to become more of the focus just prior to that, like kind of end of sixth form, going into early uni. Just music in general. I wasn't thinking about it.
Manifest itself then? Like, so you were at uni, but your main interest it wasn't what you were doing academically, but it was music. Like, what were you doing at that point? Like, how were you
exploring? Like, I was just exploring my emotions, exploring how I felt, and like what I gravitated to as a person. Like I say, music had gradually, from those earlier secondary school years, had been more and more of a thing for me as a listener, and actually delving into deeper into music and how it's made and what kind of songs are made and what it actually makes you feel, to then going towards that early uni time. It through the whole point, like I was blind to it. Thinking back on it, I was so blind to it. It was just slowly becoming a bigger and bigger thing for me, just naturally. And I started to, like, for example, that first year in Bath and even in Hertfordshire, I was DJing a lot. that
Oh,
was a
is it?
that was a big thing. Yeah, like the big thing was like, do you know what? Obviously, I'm doing my business and all of that degree and everything, but I want to get into DJing because I like spinning tracks and I like finding tracks and I just like music. So I
Yeah,
was looking at it first of all. I wasn't looking at it as making my own and being a vocalist. I was looking at it as just having music as a part of what I do.
what sort of records were you spinning at that time? Like what
It
music?
was like, I mean, I was even doing, because it was kind of hip hop, like rap, old school hip hop. I mean, it was even things as well, like house, like tropical house. I was doing that kind of thing because it was obviously like you're in uni, you party a lot and things like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
that
You need to play party music, man. This is the bottom line.
exactly, it comes down to it heavily. So I was doing that kind of stuff like bass line, like quite a mix of stuff, even commercial music, dance music. I
Bit of
was
jungle in there as well, or no?
drunk. Yeah, do you know what? Not as much as I'd like. I wish not as much as I'd like to say, but
Yeah, yeah.
there was bits of jungle here and there, like stuff that you'd hear in parties and whatnot, and that makes you a bit more upbeat and everything. And that was a mix of what I was kind of mixing. But even during that time, those uni years of doing DJ, and I was starting to put things down on tracks as well. Because I had what like where it came from really is just I had more and more of a voice that was finding itself closer and closer towards coming to the top. Where I was younger and I'd suppressed it, like I'd been more of an introvert, or I'd been a bit more like I'd been made to feel like I wasn't valid, no, my voice wasn't validated enough to put it out there. And I didn't have as much self-belief and self-confidence in myself. From then, during that whole period, it had been coming up more and more and more. So I
Yeah.
think that's where during those uni years, it was like, because I even, like I say, I would grab a couple little beats here and there, write some bars and just put them on. Obviously, they were dead. Like I'll tell you now, live. Oh, like that was when I was first starting to put
If you're
lyrics
starting
together.
out, man, like you're not gonna fucking write. I don't know, some of the best rap songs that have ever been written. If you're just sort of like laying bars down on tracks. So.
This is the thing, and it is learning how to actually do that. It's learning how to get comfortable with trying to put things on a mic and then put them onto a beat and make it work. And I was just exploring, like I did a bit of DJing, I did a bit of trying to go into producing, and obviously I did a bit of putting some vocals on instrumentals. Like I have an old laptop somewhere in my room. I have no idea where. I'm not even sure if it still works, but that's got all my like a bunch of my old stuff on it where I just found these different beats that I vibed with and started putting things down on it. But it was like even in that second year in Hertfordshire, it was still quite heavily DJ. That's what it was, and it was still quite heavily music. And again, because I think that voice was still coming up, and there hadn't been that click yet as to be like, yeah, like you can be this person, you can do this. Until so yeah, so when I
What was it like then that caused the click? Because obviously, you can see it building up and up and up. Obviously, from your experiences at university, and you know you're beginning to write now. And then, what was the kind of like final impetus of being like, you know what, I can do this. This is what I'm gonna do.
So yeah, it was after coming out that second year uni. It was my good friend Elliot. He's so I came out to so coming out of that uni year, as you mentioned, I went to go and then work on a bar. I mean, I'd worked in this particular place a little while before that, on and off, whilst I was in school, and then obviously at uni during summers and whatnot, local to where I was, and came back to working on a bar. And he was just there. We was there. Obviously, you had a whole bunch of new people there, and this would have been a few years back. I can't remember exactly what year. And I came across this guy, Elliot Frampton, and he kind of we got cool with each other. We just kind of obviously get to know who you're working with, and you're friendly in that. And we was working on a bar maybe for a month or so. We was just getting to know each other and get to be a bit more friendly, and we started getting a little bit closer. And you'd have sometimes you'd have some drinks after work, or you'd have little nights here where you'd meet up and do your thing or chill, whatever it might be. And he's heavily a music guy, and he's been a music guy. He done that previously in his life from young, and it was refreshing to meet someone that was about that, and he was kind of very uplifting and very positive in the way
Yeah,
that he was, and he was a dreamer. I always like to think of myself as a dreamer, and he was another dreamer, and I think that's why we gravitated towards each other a bit. And I remember it was one thing that one time, like I say, after about a month or so of getting to know each other, we was we was I can't remember exactly where we was, but we was kind of just chilling together, and he said to me like, like, do you? Because I told him I like music and I'm into the rhythm and making music and this, that, and the other. He's like, can you rap? Like, he's like, yeah, I bet you can. I bet you can rap. Basically, told me like, I bet you can rap. Like, I was like, yeah. Do you know what? Like, it's funny you say that because I love that. Like, I want to, because at the time it was a thought. By that point, I was right on the precipice of starting to go with it, and it was like, why don't I just kind of do it more?
Yeah.
And he was
You're at
like,
the edge of the cliff. You just needed someone to push you over.
someone to just like, yeah, just clarify, like, I bet you can, like,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and even just then, live, just started freestyling. Like, I just started, he was trying to incite it more in me. Like I say, he was a very musical and creative person, and it was refreshing, and that kind of brought it out of me more. And for me to sit there, and I sat there and just started putting some little rhymes together. Like I say, just freestyles. Obviously, we'd be there chilling. He'd put on a little beat, and I'd just put little things together, and we'd just be like, yeah, like, this is different, like, this is nice, like, this is different, this is good, like, this is something, there's something real here, there's
Yeah,
something.
we've got it from the kind of sound of it, and like, from what Elliot tells me, it was a really kind of organic thing, and it's kind of, yeah, it's definitely reflected in the music for sure. I'm coming on to the music as well because I mean, at what time was this like going on in your life when he said, "I bet you can rap," and da, 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 because the jump to November 2019, you're being signed, and so you've obviously made a massive leap in your kind of career as a rapper. Like, how did you go from there to there? Like, what was the kind of timing in it?
So that would have been because when I started to obviously got to meet him properly, and with this was happening, it was only around about a year before that, maybe
Bruh.
a bit more than a year before that. It would have been around about, maybe it was early 2018, sorry, or maybe even kind of the dates get so mixed up in my head, but around about that kind of time, I'd say more a year and a half before that point of, like you mentioned, getting signed. And it was because I know he was at a point then. I mean, obviously, I didn't know at the time. I know now that he was in the point of because he just come off of something himself, and he'd come off of one thing that he tried to do with different
Yeah,
people
yeah, yeah.
himself, and he was at a point now where um, he was looking for something new, and he was kind of soul searching, like, without even fully realizing that he was looking for the next thing, and
His next kind of creative project, as it were.
kind of thing. Yeah, like, and what he wanted to devote his life to next.
Mm.
It's just like I was, and so, and we got cool, and we basically sat down, like, and after having that bit of clarification, like, look, someone genuinely believes in me, let's do it, let's go. And at the time, I mean, at first, don't get me wrong, at first it wasn't like, let's go, let's do it together, let's boom. At first it was like, okay, now let me try this more, let me do this more. So
Yeah,
during that whole
baby,
kind of
baby.
year, yeah, like during that year and a half, it was me, like, I was kind of putting tracks on SoundCloud. I was more focused. I'd dropped the DJing a bit, dropped all of that. I was focused on actually learning to write lyrics more and learning to be more of a lyricist, and get deeper into that side of things. So I was dropping a few different tracks on SoundCloud, just kind of amateur, just finding some kind of beats wherever I found them, and in, as like I say, as a easiest way as I could, just
Yeah,
put my vocals on and da 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 da. And we went through that, and there was a period of kind of, yeah, it was just me, so more so doing it myself, and until we got to the point of around about it was 2019, it was, I'd say, kind of early to mid 2019, where he was like, because Elliot wanted to be my manager. He wanted to say, look, like, I can see that you can do something here, and you can actually, you can be someone with this, and you can go far, and you can do certain things, and I want to help you do it. I want to help you grow into that person, and this, that, and the other. Because where he was looking to kind of go more into that sides of managing and whatnot.
yeah, for sure.
But
What
I
was
hadn't.
well, sorry to cut you off again. I keep cutting you off. I feel really bad about it, but I've got like loads of questions I want to ask you.
It's cool, man.
One of the things though as well is like up until this point, you've gone through a massive period of what can only be classed as self-doubt up until now. What was it like to have someone believe in you and just tell you like, yeah, just go and do it. You can do it.
it was powerful, man. Like it was so, I'm so grateful for it. Like I'm grateful for him just because it's like you say, it was someone that was, I had a lot of fake love up until that point.
Mm,
That was like, I've realized obviously now where I'm a much more rounded person, like there's still a lot of growing to do and lot of things to go through still. But now I'm a lot more understanding, and I'm a little more like, I know how things go a lot more, but at the time through the whole period, it was just like, why? It was just like, why is there so many people that I'm a very kind, like deep down, I've got nothing but love to give. I wish nothing but love for the world. Like I want to do a lot of things that change the world. Like I don't care what else I do. I don't want money, fame, all of that. Like I want to make the world better. And I want to help people that have felt like me. And I want to help people that have been in these places that need help and that need a voice. And I want to maybe be the voice that I never had. That's a big thing just with my life in general. Like I want to do that. And he seemed to be, like I say, there was so many people that they might, they didn't have that feeling. They weren't genuinely loving people or genuinely kind people. Everyone was always trying to be better and protect themselves and like I say, be that step up, or there was always that competition or that always that fake side of things.
mm,
And like I say, coming across him, there was nothing fake. It was real, and it was like another person that wanted to do that, that believed a lot in love and believed a lot in kindness and positivity
for sure.
and this, that, and the other. And he was showing me some, and it was like it was. I mean, yeah, it wasn't even just refreshing. I can't even say it was just refreshing. It was like a whole different like lifeline, I suppose. It was another thing for my mentality just to be like, okay, look, now you thought about this and not like you've been going through this and you've been da 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 da. Now there's someone that can really
Mm,
be in your corner, basically. Someone that can be in your corner and help you go through these troubles and whatnot that you go
yeah,
through.
for
So
sure.
it was a blessing, to be honest.
Yeah, it sounds like as well, growing up, I kind of, I resonate with that a little bit as well because there's an element of when you're growing up and when you're in these systems of education and, even the workplace as well, because there are elements of sort of Machiavellian type behavior in people. Do you know what I mean? Like the constant need to like get one up on people or, you know, beat someone to the punch or get that promotion or make sure at all costs get the grade kind of thing. It's a kind of, as Tupac put it in an interview, he's the kind of gimme 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 push 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 attitude towards other people. And I keep using the phrase from the outside looking in, but from that perspective it definitely looks like there is a certain amount of love between the two of you, creatively and in terms of the business. um which is something we'll come on to in a bit, talking about MDRN, but specifically coming into the music now as well, and like how you kind of found your voice and the sort of first tracks you made. I was listening to, all 7 of the tracks that you've got currently got out on Spotify, which I'll read out now for anyone who's listening who wants to go and listen to Prez's music, because get on the wave right now. I'm telling you, it's gonna go far. I've been listening to it like I was a crackhead today.
Yeah, yeah, I'm
So many
pretty.
questions, juxtaposition, the man, all I said, Wolf Prevail, Me Over You, which has just come out. It's a fantastic track. Um, and it's definitely what was clear to me as well is that you can kind of see the sort of progression and change that you're talking about in your music, that we've spoken about through all of the tracks. I think, to be specific, like so many questions definitely, I mean, as the title kind of has the connotation of you finding your voice, it definitely is in there. But what I felt was kind of clear from that track was you had this idea in your head of who you were trying to reach, which was rare for an artist who's like just making their very first bit of music. You kind of were talking about helping people who had demons, talking about like how are you going to find your freedom, how are you going to find your success. Was that something you were trying to aim to put across in that first track, or was it just sort of like what naturally ended up coming out anyway?
Do you know what? Like that, it was so much more natural, and I think that was what made it so magical, made it so special. Because like I'd put down some tracks before that on SoundCloud, like I say, like not professionally before we decided, like yeah, let's go, let's do this. And they were a bit more kind of me finding things, and I'd actually thought about them more. And I was trying to make tracks. I was like, okay, now let me try and do the music thing. But when it came to so many questions, I remember like writing it. I was in my room and it was almost like it was a dream. It was almost like I was possessed, like some like by my inner self, like the inner Presz, and I was like that was screaming to come out and say what it wanted to say. Because I remember it was like it came obviously normally when I sit down and I write for a while, I'll think of this and then I'll think of that, and then I might put them together and then I might put this there and whatnot. But it was just bar for bar, it was just coming out like there, like I heard money is power, but how can I stack my truth? I don't want to get paid by the hour. How do I run to the peas in the booth? Like it was just like I was literally asking myself, and it was just a narrative. It was an internal narrative, and it was so crazy natural. It was like 5 minutes, and I was sat there, and I was like, I've written it, like it's there, like there's a whole song there. I've done it, I've written it. It came out rapid,
Really
naturally.
strange. I mean, because you'd imagine a song that good would take fucking ages for like, you'd be stumbling over words for like fucking hours and hours and then so many questions. What the fuck comes next? Like, but that's mad to hear. It's just like 5 minutes of bang, there it was.
This is the thing, because more often than not, the best songs that have the most meaning behind them and the most power and the most content, the most emotion, they're not. That's how they are. You don't think about them. When you think about things, you go too deep into it and you overthink it, which I was doing at times. Prior to that, even since then, as human beings, we have to work through that. But it was like more often than not the things that because it's most true to you. At the
Yeah.
end of the day, that's what it is. It's most true. It's like what internally your inner voice is what it wants to say. And it wasn't even, I didn't even realize what I had on my hands here. Like what I just thought, oh, this is another track that I'm excited to go studio and get down. And then it wasn't until we got in the studio, I don't know, a couple of weeks after, and I was there and I was like, yo, like you lot, like I got a track to get down, da 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 da. I want to get in there and get it done. And it was like, yeah, like we recorded it one take. I just went in there and just recorded it straight, all together, no stopping, no changing, all the way through. And the people I was with, they was
Oh.
yeah, like yeah, like is that okay? Like we don't need nothing more. Like that's there, that's it. Like that was mad. And then obviously they started touching it up and whatnot. And then listening back to it and obviously hearing them tell me that, I was like, wow, like that was actually it was just true.
Mm. There was also as well like another kind of aspect to so many questions that I wanted to ask you about because you talk about um kind of the nature of people and how it was a breath of fresh air to meet Elliot and da 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 da. And like what it seems to me was there was like little to no encouragement up until that point, or prior to that point. And there was like an element of like you were sort of questioning doubters. I mean, who had like was there any doubt as to how well it would go, or had anyone vocalized that they doubted how good you were at MCing music up until that point?
I always had doubts, man. Like I've always, for some reason, I think because I was a little bit different, people always wanted to kind of just they always wanted to I think because this is what I've tried to think about a lot. It's hard to be in other people's mindsets and it's hard to think about how other people
Mm.
see you and about why they act the way that they act. And I think, like I say, because without even realizing it, like subconsciously, I always wanted to be a bit different and see and say and do different things. People took that on a deeper level the wrong way. And there was always kind of this friction towards me trying to be better and me trying to be more and
Mm.
me, for who I wanted to be and who I could see myself being. It was like people were like, nah, like
They were opposed to it.
there was a lot of opposition, like in everything and a lot of things that I did. And especially when I was trying to go through this whole point of growing and becoming a new person, it
Mm.
was like people like I had to change a lot of things and I had to like cut people off and I had to change my lifestyle with things and forget parts of my life that weren't good for me. And there was a lot of animosity in that fact, in that manner. And especially when it started to be more and more clear,
Mm.
I was okay. Now I'm going to do music, where I dropped a couple more amateur things on SoundCloud, and then moving towards okay. Now I'm on Spotify and that. Until that first track, so many questions. Like I was getting, there was some people that was sat there realizing like, oh, what Presz, he's doing music now. Like that's what he's doing because they thought I was on nothing. They wanted me to be on nothing. They wanted me to be doing nothing. They wanted me to just be another kid that talked to empty promises or
Fucking
whatever.
nine to
Because
five.
they didn't want me to be better than them. No one, no one wants you to be better than them, and no one wants you to do more than them. And without saying it, that's what they don't like that. And it wasn't until so many questions that people sat there and wow, like you've actually got an ability for this. Like this is not
There's a talent there for sure.
exactly like this. It's not just another, another guy that wants to sit there and do music for the money or the fame or whatever. Like you actually, like, that's a single, you know.
Yeah, and for sure. Look, man. I mean, we've, I mean, I think the thing is about your music is specifically like rap, hip hop, and UK grime. For me, like listening to it, right? There's a lot of that kind of genre of music, which, you know, I'm one of these people, and I'm sure there are other people who think the same thing. Is that a lot of it can be artistically appreciated, but isn't really personally accessible to them. If you see what I mean, because for instance, like if I was to listen to a drill artist, yeah, I could see, there's artistic merit in this, of course, because someone's rapping over a beat. There's clear, they've obviously thought about what they've done. They've obviously got a narrative in their head and they've got something they want to convey. But I think the difference is when you listen to something that kind of resonates with you and is not speaking specifically about a certain lifestyle and is talking about a set of sentiments and human feelings, that hits you on a different level, because that can resonate with you anytime, any of the day. And I think that's the kind of thing that is really important for whether it be film, music, art in general, because it has to kind of, I think, transcend the format that it's put in. And that's something that your music really, really does. And specifically, like one of the songs that I thought like kind of transcended that sort of typical format of rap. And it was, I mean, I was almost in shock when I was listening to it, because I couldn't really fathom how someone like not of your level, because that's like disrespectful to you, but who had just sort of like come into rap at that kind of early stage had done it. I listened to Juxtaposition and I was genuinely blown away by it. It's like what it has rapidly become one of my favorite tracks.
Thank you.
Just full stop. And I kind of wanted to talk to you about that because, through all of the things that we talked about right now, I really, really think that it mirrored or mirrors what had happened in your life, because it kind of, from the lines that you use about like there's no shame in my depression, obviously there's a repeating theme there, but there's also like a kind of, if you see what I mean, a shifting melody, because it obviously goes from being fairly upbeat when it starts to like being really morose and depressed in the middle, and then obviously being upbeat again. Is that how kind of you were aiming to write? Was it designed to mirror what had happened to you up until that point? Like what was the kind of story behind that song?
Like Juxta, I wasn't thinking of it to be, I wanted it to be a bit of a journey, definitely. Like I wanted it to be an artwork. With Juxtaposition, I wasn't trying to make a single. I was trying to make artwork. Like I wanted to keep pushing this voice that I'd found. And I wanted people to understand like what I was saying and what I was thinking and what I was actually behind the scenes, like going through my head and what I was doing. And that's what Juxtaposition, that's what I tried to make it, like a bit of a work of art, where you've got like these different styles and these different narratives that all come under one voice and one journey. But like you say, they have different manners and different styles and different emotions and themes about them. And it kind of just came together, really. It was these different parts. I even almost built each part separately and brought it together. It wasn't a matter of me, sorry, pardon. It wasn't a matter of me just kind of sitting down like, okay, I'm gonna do this. It was how I was feeling, because it was like by then I'd started to see a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of where I was at the time in my life and what I could now start doing. So it was where those earlier feelings and those earlier thoughts, they were still there, and I still had to speak them and express them. But I'd now started to try and understand things again on a bit more of just an authentic standard, without going too deeply into overthinking things still, and kind of sitting too deeply in old mindsets and whatnot. And Juxtaposition was like, I'm glad to hear, like I've had people tell me that it's helped them with ways that they've been feeling, and it's helped them with like trying to get out of these mindsets themselves. Because I think at that time, I suppose that's what it was doing for me. I was doing it for myself. It was helping me to like, okay, now you've actually done something here and of real value, and Like now you can really start to have, it was almost like I had to do something right that merited me being able to grow further.
Mm,
Like I didn't want to allow myself to grow further unless I deserved it,
yeah,
unless I'd earned it. And that was kind of maybe the point where I was like, okay, now you can kind of look to the next phase because
for
you
sure.
earned it, you know?
Because and it's interesting you saying that because from listening to the song, um, it seems like you could break it down, I suppose, into almost like three distinct sections. I mean, I hope this is like ringing true to you because from my interpretation of listening to it, that's what I saw. I felt like in the sort of first section, because in the first section of the song, when it's sort of really, really upbeat, it kind of feels like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost seems like you're speaking to your past self, and how you felt like sort of just when you were on the cusp of just before you're going into rapping, because there's this one line like, what was the thing? I saw a lesson learned, a lesson built, a curse with all in all my words. I know I've butchered that completely, but you know what I mean. You had this idea of what you wanted to be, but there was also kind of it was a double-edged sword almost of on the one hand you want to be a rapper, but you understand that people aren't going to necessarily accept that at first. Does that ring true to you at all?
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. That like you kind of you got that from it. There was definitely that kind of vibe in it, you know, and that because that was tying into more of that maybe slightly more confused mindset that I was in slightly earlier.
Mm,
And that was kind of again speaking it and kind of letting it out and making it vocal so that I could almost move on. It's like that's all it was. It tied into being able to move on from these mindsets
mm.
by finally like speaking on them and almost being in my head like, okay, now you've it's said, it's done, and now you can you can grow on to the next.
It was an amazing. Yeah. I mean, not to kind of linger on it too long, but it was an amazing examination of like, what was going on in your head as well, because there's obviously that big sort of section in the middle of the song where all the beat completely slows down. It's all like really, really morose and kind of tragic. Like you say one line which is like, I got used to losing or something, like it was something to the effect of like you were consistently felt that like everything you did was like something was
Yeah,
consistent.
like loss after loss for me is it's not new to me. I got
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Loss after loss. That was the kind of, and I was just thinking to myself, wow, fucking hell. And then, when it came full circle as well, was like, there was quite, it was, I was wondering, were you speaking to like the sort of audience that you'd almost, I don't suppose imagine, but like, you sort of were aiming for in that first song of So Many Questions, when you're speaking to the people of like, you were telling people that they were wonderful, that they had things that they were, they were worth they were worth more than what they were considering themselves to be in life.
Yeah, so like you said, that first section, the first part of it was that kind of previous mindset and kind of trying to get a bit that closure on it. And that middle section was trying to be a bit more real with it. Like this is how it's been, this is what I've had to live through, just like I'm sure a lot of you have had to live through. And this is how it goes sometimes, and this is part of life. This is what we do, like loss after loss, it doesn't matter. Like now, by this point, from where we are now, this is part of it. There's no letting it destroy us no more. It was
Mm,
like a testament. It's like taking a nightmare and imagine the most horrible, huge, disgusting monster that scares you to your deepest core and putting a bit of little bow around their head. It was like taking the worst of it and making a thing of it. Like this is part of the journey and we value it and this is a part of it. But we still do our thing right and we still continue and we still go and then that last point of it being because like you say, I do speak a bit more directly to a listener. And
mm,
you know what? Like it's a listener, yeah, but it's myself as well. Because it's like, yeah, like you've been doing that first bit and then you've gone through the middle bit that's realized the gritty truth and the gritty reality of how you might have felt or how you might have been through or whatnot. But then you've always got to have that hope. Like
yeah.
that the last section was hope. And like I do hope that anyone that comes across me or comes across it like or even this conversation like can go and listen to that and especially that last section because like I say like I'm speaking to other people, I'm speaking to myself, I'm speaking to everyone that
Mm,
regardless of this what's just happened or regardless of whatever it might be, there's always that hope. Like without hope we don't have nothing else, like we can be more, and we all we wanted was to be happy, all we wanted was to be good, all we wanted was to be special and kind of cared for and loved.
mm.
And it's like we can have that. you know, we can have that, and we just have to be it ourselves. We have to give it and we'll get it back. And it's like there's light, you know.
For sure. And it kind of like almost, you know, we're going to come on to the other tracks in a minute, because I think thematically speaking, in terms of your music, you know, man, and you know, being the man or I'm the man, like, is speaking about like trying to sort of self manifest, and Wolf as well, and all I said, the freestyle, they kind of talk about, you know, this idea of, I mean, so you know, all I said and Wolf have this kind of edge to them, which is like there's something dark lurking in the background, but like Wolf, for example, feels like you're trying to conquer something, or you're trying to like assert yourself over a fear, and the all I said, you know, freestyle as well has that edge to it. But yeah, it kind of, it baffles me a little bit, because I think what you're kind of, from my perspective anyway, when you were talking about juxtaposition, you know, I'm wondering overall if this was kind of what you're going for, was you're speaking about the idea of like the human spirit and maybe self-manifestation, you know, because the whole thing, the whole body of music as a movement, you know, as I said, like thematically speaking, mirrors like your journey through life so far.
Yeah, yeah, no, like in particular things like Wolf and All I Said, where there was a bit of a different vibe. I was basically like trying to continue running from my demons. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there was like me, I needed to back myself up in what I was trying to do, and how I was now changing. Because by this point, I'm like trying to tell myself, like, look, you've taken steps, you've done some positive things, and you
Mm.
started chasing this more in the real world. Like, yeah, you've been thinking this for the longest, and you've been in this mindset for the longest, but you've actually been now taking steps towards it.
Yeah.
Still had that like self-doubt there, and I still had that hate. Like, these are the demons that I'm sure a lot of people deal with, but it's demons that I'm always dealing with, and were very much so dealing with at the time. Like, you know, it's still not enough, or like you've not done anything, or what have you really done, or what have you just that and the other. And like with Wolf, for example, like who's afraid of the, like literally the hook, like who's afraid of the big bad wolf? I faced him and I kept my cool. Like I was trying to tell myself, like to cement myself, like you've done this, like you've been facing these demons, you've been facing
Mm.
your nightmares, you know, like you've been here, like still trying to do what you're trying to, you know, what you're trying to do and what you love, like, you know, well done. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
It's a pat on the
let's
back
go,
for sure.
like,
Yeah. And you deserve it. You deserve it as well, man, for sure. Like, and it's just crazy to me as well. I mean, this is the thing about your music as well, from when I was listening to it, because you can tell that there's a versatility to the sound. Like, you know, I kind of couldn't pin an exact formula down to your tracks. It felt like there was a, even from the few that are now on Spotify, it feels like there's a constant evolution, track to track, track to track. You know, thematically, the only thing that I could say which was consistent about, you know, all three of those tracks up until Prevail, which is something else that's separate I want to ask you about. But it felt like it was about this kind of idea of manifestation and becoming the person that you wanted to be, which is, you know, it was amazing to listen to, because I think in these kind of times that we've been living through, obviously with 2020 and coronavirus and everything, people need to hear that. They need to hear, they need to hear the kind of most positive aspects of themselves reflected somehow through music as well. Um, and speaking on Prevail, like, you know, I think that there is an obvious theme there, and we talked about this previously, and I won't ask for specifics on, you know, on this podcast, but you know, there's quite an obvious theme because of the kind of the artwork of it that you're sort of placed behind, you know, sort of a glass looking out over to it onto a courtroom. And so I was wondering like what that kind of experience of having that kind of brush with the law, like how did it play into your music, like because it felt like there was a certain anxiety there, but you knew you were going to kind of overcome the kind of things that have been put on you.
yeah, like, so, I mean, that was obviously that was a part of my life. And there was a part of like, I was still kind of coming out of trying to get things together, and I was still a bit, in a bit of a mad place. And it was like, again, like that was another chance for me to kind of almost lock that off and kind of get a bit of closure from it, where that whole where it was inspired from, where I went through some things with that, and kind of and got, you know, came into contact with things in a bad way, in the wrong way, and done things that I shouldn't have done. and it was kind of like behind it all. I think from Prevail, it was the fact it was just trying to say like, look, behind it all, like it was just me trying to find myself and just me trying to, whatever people were involved or whatever people were aware of it. I was, I wasn't trying to be the person that you thought I was trying to be. Like I wasn't trying to go the wrong way, but I was just trying to, there was realness and emotion, a real, I want to say maybe innocent emotion behind it.
For sure, for sure. And I mean, coming full circle now. I mean, we talked about the ideas of like kind of what the kind of music is that you're trying to make and who you're trying to reach with it. Do you think that that's something that's going to change over time? Because, from listening to your music, the quality is obviously there, man. And I think that realistically, it's only a matter of time before you do blow up and before you do become really hyper successful. Like,
Yeah,
is the kind of, I suppose, narrative of the music going to change with your life? Are you going to sort of start, I suppose, talking about a kind of lifestyle that you may live or be leading, or do you want to consistently make stuff that kind of, I suppose, connects with people emotionally, or is it about striking the balance between the two?
like I think, yeah, there's definitely a balance. Do you know what I'm saying? Like to an extent, I've got to definitely find like I'm coming more full circle a bit more now.
Mm,
And it's like during the whole time I've been trying to find my sound and find exactly, what I want to do and what's gonna make me happy doing and who I'm gonna be above all of it, exactly who I'm gonna be. And like a big thing with it, like I do music. I don't do music to do music. Yeah. I love poetry. I love language and I love things with meaning. I love things with emotion. So a big part of it will always be that I want to create things that help people. They help inspire people. They help motivate people. They help people get out of maybe depressions. They help people see the more the beauty in life.
mm,
And there'll always be that side of it. Like a lot of my music will always, the fact of it will be is to give something back to people,
mm,
and even in the narrative, in a voice, give something back to myself as well. But to an extent there will be balance there, because look, music is a truth. Music is, it's a vocalized truth from whoever, by whoever it comes from. And it's a fact of, there's going to be different aspects to my life, like everyone, and there's going to be different periods and different parts to it. And there's going to be, there's other emotions. There's sometimes it's not all about that. Sometimes it's all about trying to just celebrate being happy.
yeah, for sure, man.
There's going to be that to it as well. But with me, like along the journey, like I always know, I mean, I'll be doing this forever, no matter what happens, no matter what, I'll be doing this forever because it's just what makes me happy. There's not much else that I genuinely live for anymore, other than like, there's more and more things that I'm getting to do, but deep down to it, when it comes to the bedrock, like that's what drives me, right? And as long as I can happily say that what I'm creating and what I'm putting out to the world, like I'm proud to put out to the world, then I can be happy in that, and I can continue and do that, you know.
For sure, for sure. Do you think that that's something that kind of, you know, from listening to kind of rappers in modern times, is something that people should maybe step away from as well? Because in terms of relatability, people speaking about the kind of lavish lifestyles that they live doesn't necessarily resonate with everyone. Or is it something that you just think, well, it's part of the product and it's part of what people kind of aspire to?
I think like, look, like again, obviously, like I say, music is truths. Good music is about truths, right? And when people are in these positions themselves, like congratulations to them, they've made it. They've gone through whatever they've gone through, and they've had to do what they've had to do to, to make it to where they are. And they might talk about lavish lifestyles and whatnot, but and having nice things and all this stuff that you hear about in music these days. And there's like, no one has a right to take that away, because everyone has the right to express what they live and what they do and what they've experienced. And if you have that and you've achieved that and you've gained it, you have that right. It's fine. But I think there's deeper things in life to talk about. There's deeper issues, and there's deeper things that, as an artist, especially people that are a bit more exposed, people that are actually kind of out there and known about, like they have, I think, a lot of artists don't use it, but they have an obligation to use their voice in a positive manner. And there's a lot of things that are wrong with the world and the way that we're going, and kind of people aren't looking after themselves and living in the right way. And I think as people that have voices, as artists, it's like I say, it's part of our obligation to try and change that. Now there is the other side of that, because what it is when it comes to, as a normal listener, as a normal individual, let's say, you know, you live a fairly average life, like you're not living crazy lavish or whatever. It's I mean, yeah, it's something to look up to when you have people that are making music about all this stuff. It's something to motivate you. Like, I have this, you know, if you want it, work for it, and you're gonna be thankful, you're gonna deserve it. Then that's all well and good, but there's also like a toxicity to it. You know, like it's people that then take it as like, oh, like they then take it the wrong way. I don't have this stuff, or I can't fully relate. I've not done well with this, or I've not done. It comes back to so much, even in kind of social media and just society in general. There's so much competition and there's so much overexposure to things that others have, and to things that we can have at different points in life, and especially this obsession with having it all as young as possible and having as much as possible as young as possible, that can be very damaging, like I say, toxic to people, when they don't understand that, they don't understand the full process of it. This person you're listening to has done this, and they've had to sacrifice this to get to having what they're having, or talking what they're talking about. And it's not a thing to let that kind of sit on your psyche, you know.
For sure. I mean, like, you know, we've previously spoken about the kind of what you know, what music is going to last, what music won't last, in terms of standing the test of time and stuff like that. And it is interesting because you kind of, I suppose, you kind of have this imposed image of the kind of people that musicians are kind of right now in the present day, and you don't sort of take the time to take a step back and look at who they were and see the journey they've come on. So it's interesting you say that, because as well as like showing off money and stuff, and like the kind of, you know, the trappings of fame and the things that you can have as well, I think it kind of superimposes this idea that people, they go from being an artist with an idea, in not in, you know, this is in their audience's eyes, not in their own, but they go from being an artist and a person to someone who's a commodity and a product. And I think that's the kind of, I think that's the kind of worrying precedent to set for people, because, you know, I think it does lead to all sorts of problems that can occur within the music industry. I mean, I was speaking the other day to my brother and his band about the Vice documentary that came out about Young Lean, for example, and how he went from being someone who was just like sort of, you know, his first rap song seemed to be a meme on the internet, and then as his career took off and the trappings of fame sort of like got to him, you know, the drugs and this, that, and the other, like it became he became disassociated obviously from himself and had that episode in the hospital. But I imagine that's how the public perception of people like that in those positions of power would have been like that as well. And as well, I kind of like, I want to take a step back away from the music as well and talk about MDRN for a second. I mean, I've had an entire podcast dedicated to it with Elliot and Ollie, but you're very much heavily involved in that as well now. Like, you're, as I understand it, the president of MDRN. Like, talk about like what's the kind of role like? How are you finding it so far?
Yeah, like it's just creating something that, I mean, you know, MDRN is something that we all believe in heavily, and I believe in heavily. I mean, you know, it's make dreams reality now, and it's about what it stands for. And I don't even like to look at myself as having a role within it, or being this person or whatever, or this, that, and the other. It's just more about doing what we love and doing what we should do and what we need to be able to make this work, and to be able to grow it into something that's really, really there and really exists. And which is what we've been doing over the past, you know, couple of years, and however long it's been going. And it's been really fun, you know, like it's been testing, because it's, you know, it's challenging. You get things thrown your way, and you have to live through it, and you have to grow, and you learn more. And it's been exciting. It's been great, because a big part of what MDRN do is trying to give back to people, you know, and create things for people, that we weren't there, and allow others to create, period. You know, it's just about creativity and promoting positive collaboration and creativity. So it's really cool to have been a part of the things that we've done. You know, like we've done events, we've done the whole music thing, we've done mixes and this, that, and the other, and there's a lot more other things in the works. But it's a journey, you know. If anything else, you know, if not, if nothing else, it's a journey, and it's just something that can allow us all to grow further and learn more, you know.
For sure, man. For sure. I suppose it's been a fantastic conversation as well, and we're gonna come full circle into the present day now. So like I'm kind of curious to know, Me Over You's just come out. It's a fantastic track, and obviously set such a high bar as well for where your sound's going. It's really lyrically concise, very just a fantastic track. Go and listen to it right now, if you've got the opportunity to. But I'm kind of keen to know, like, what can we expect from you in 2021? What's coming, man?
More,
Just more.
more,
Full
more,
stop.
more. Like there's just more real, more power, more voice, more emotion, like things that I've not done before, things that I'd like to hope people haven't seen before, like just greatness. I don't want to, I'm not being, I don't want to
No,
be.
you don't have to plug nothing if
No, yeah, but even like above that, like I don't want to be come off as arrogant or nothing, or this, that, and the other, but just greatness, genuinely, like.
bro, you're not the one thing you can take away from this guy, you've not come across as arrogant at all. Like there's no way. There's no way. Like the body of music that you've currently got on Spotify speaks for itself. It speaks volumes, man. It's going places, bro. It's going places.
Yeah, literally, like this year onwards is just to become more focused with it, and allow people to understand a bit, just to connect with people more, and allow people to understand more about what I do, why I do it, and who I am.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to offer them and what I'm trying to do for them, and then allow people to understand themselves, what they can do and what they can be.
I previously asked Elliot a couple of deep questions in terms of like, his perspective on the world and like, what you're trying to achieve and stuff. And like, in terms of that, like, what would you say is like the sort of philosophy that you try to apply to your life? Like, how do you try to sort of go through your days? Like, what is that? If you could say it in like a maybe, I don't know, can you put it into words? Is there a mantra, or is it just like something you're not articulated before?
Just to live life, like to love more, to give more, to be kind, and kind of to be someone that you can be proud of, and and to give back more, and allow others to understand that together, it's all about togetherness and unity, and together we can be more. There's bigger things to this life than what we might concern ourselves with on a daily. There's more to think about and more to talk about than trivial things,
Hey everyone, welcome back. Last night we had to pause recording due to some, should we say, technical difficulties that Prez experienced. So yeah, two questions for you, Prez, just to wrap up the kind of interview.
Sure.
I was wondering what advice you'd have for someone just sort of starting out in music, whether it be rapping or whatever. What would you say to someone just starting out?
Yeah, like to someone, kind of getting going with it, I'd say find yourself first before you worry about everything else, before you worry about actually kind of doing music or being someone in music. Worry about why you want to do it. Worry about, what are your reasons? What are your motivations? What do you love about it? What makes you smile? What makes you happy about it? And really just kind of delve a bit deeper into yourself and the meanings behind why you're making this decision, instead of worrying about the kind of the outer world when you do first get going. And then also on top of that, like just, don't listen to, don't pay too much attention to anyone else, don't pay too much attention to what anyone is saying to you, or even, for that matter, to what anyone else is doing as well. And you might start off having to learn a few different things. You're not going to be the best straight away, but it will come after a bit.
For sure. Okay. And just to wrap things up really quickly, where can people find you / follow you online?
Yeah, so Instagram, you can get me is Presz_music. That's PRESZ_music. Facebook, I'm actually on there as well. Same thing. And yeah, you can. Those are the main two spots you can find me. You can always reach out. I've got a website coming soon. You can also check out MDRN. Same thing, MDRN_group. And you can keep up to date to anything that I do or the team does on there.
All right, brilliant. Well, Preston, thank you very much for your time. It's been brilliant talking to you. Yeah, take care, everyone.